And yeah, I'm gonna have to tell you the story of how these books started at some point.
Oh, well, if you would like.
All right.
Well, go ahead.
All right. This is the glamorous beginnings of the Dresden Files. I got my bachelor's degree in English literature, which with an emphasis in creative writing, which only set my career back 3 or 4 years. But I'd gone to graduate school in journalism in their professional writing program, where they had classes like how to write a genre fiction novel, and for the class you wrote a novel, and you got graded on your novel at the end of the class, and the entire thing was just here. This is how you do all this stuff. Go. The teacher's name was Debbie Chester. I think she's retired from teaching, but she's recently published a book, the Formula of Fantasy Fiction, and it's a book about writing craft. And so she was trying to teach me all these wonderful things about writing craft, and I may be a little obstreperous occasionally when people are trying to tell me what to do. So she kept giving me very, very, very good advice, and I kept ignoring her because, after all, I have a bachelor's degree in English literature with an emphasis in creative writing. And I was going to be a swords and horses fantasy writer. That's what I was going to do. I was going to write the next epic Lord of the Rings thingy because I was sure that was my destiny. And so I kept working on that, kept not getting anywhere. So she kept advising me, hey, you need to try some different genres, you need to try some different things. Even if you don't end up working there, trying it is going to give you a different feel and a different appreciation for the craft of writing itself. And that's kind of what you need to focus on. So I was like, so at one point I finally went, okay, fine. And I'd written several books, and I wrote this X-Files ripoff, and then. I just got sick of her giving me advice, because she'd come up to me, she'd be like, Jim, you're always talking about, you're talking about this new show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a lot. You're talking about Laurel Hamilton's writing a lot. Maybe you should try something kind of in that area, because you're always bringing it up in class. Or you bring up Babylon 5 a lot in class, and when we come to talking writing craft, and maybe you should try some science fiction. And I was like, but I'm a swords and horses fantasy author. No, but one semester I finally decided I was going to prove Debbie wrong. And the means I chose to do that was genius, because I was about 25 and in college, and I thought I knew a lot. So I said to myself, okay, you know how you're going to do it? You're going to do everything she says. You're going to be her good little writing monkey. You're going to fill out all these little worksheets, and you're going to do her little stupid character building exercises, and you're going to do absolutely everything she says, and then at the end, she's going to see what utter cookie-cutter pablum crap, and we're just in that kind of process. And so I wrote the first book of the Dresden Files. Sure. But yeah, I still remember walking into it was a consult course. So I still remember walking in for my consult, handing her the first couple chapters of the Dresden Files, and then being like, here. And she stops and she reads them. And you got to understand, Debbie is a teacher who does not believe in pulling punches, because the industry does not pull punches. So when she's getting you ready to go out, she's not there to hold your hand. She's there to make you a better writer. And her critiques had included such things up to and including rolling up the chapters I'd written for her, leaning across the table, popping me on the head with them and saying, what were you thinking? That's the kind of teacher she was. She was tough, but she was fair. But she gets in reading these chapters and she goes, you did it. I said, what? She says, you did it. This will sell. I do not know if this will be the first thing you sell, but this is of professional quality. You will eventually be able to sell it. When you come back in next week, I want an outline for the rest. And wow, she meant the rest of the book. So I come rolling in the next week with an outline for a 20-book series. Each book, and then a big old honking, thick doorstoppy book trilogy at the end to kind of capstone the whole thing. With all these villains and cross plots, and I babbled about it for 20 minutes at her, and she just sat there going, and I can see the look on her face now. It's the same look you get on your face when Wile E. Coyote is going off the cliff. Before he's looked down. You're just kind of waiting for that. That's what she was doing. And so she just sitting there, and later she told me, yeah, there was no way I could tell you that you were just not going to be able to sell a 20-book series to an editor as a brand new author. And I'm like, well, thank God you didn't tell me, because I went and did it. I had to do it in pieces, and we do it, I think the first contract was a 3-book contract, because I already had the second one done. And I was halfway through the third one, And they read the first one, they read the second one, and I guess they decided that I wasn't going to be a whole lot of work for them. And they wouldn't be wasting much time on the new guys, so they were like, yeah, sure, we'll do 3 books. And then we won't have to deal with new people for a while. And then the books took off, and even the editors at Rock were like, huh? So, you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these are my dumb little wizard books that basically prove how arrogant I was. And, but, I mean, if you guys are having a good time, good. That's the idea.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Debbie was the teacher. Was your instructor's name? Do you still keep in touch?
Yeah, we swap email occasionally when she published her writing craft book.
Yeah.
You know, she wrote me and said, hey, can I pay you to write an introduction? And I was like, no, you can't pay me to write an introduction. And so I wrote an introduction that was the story I just told you guys.
Nice.
And then I finished it with, in short, if somebody had told this to me 3 years earlier, I would be that much further ahead in my career. Shut up and do what Debbie tells you. And that's kind of the end, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but that's how that series got started.
That's very cool. So I've heard you say before, like in interviews about the Dresden Files, or about your writing in general, that you don't think you can write romance.
It's not that I can't write romance, it's that if I was a real mercenary writer, I would be writing romance.
Okay.
And I would have a girl's name, and I would hire somebody to go to conventions for me.
Okay. Understood.
Because romance is the money industry. I mean, if you want to make money as a writer, you know, I remember being at one of the Romantic Times, the Romantic Times convention, and somebody was talking to a bunch of panelists, and they were sort of talking down to the romance writers. I mean, there was this kind of a little bit of condescension to it. It's like, why do you come to a romance convention and do that? She's like, well, and I have heard that romance writing is a cottage industry, and she's saying this to people, you know, to people with publishing lists 60 and 70 and 100 books long. But I think it was Nora Roberts that kind of looked at and smiled very sweetly and said, well, yes, I have a cottage in Scotland. I have a cottage in and I was like, okay, Nora, you're awesome. You know, so at some point somebody was like, Jim's in danger of becoming the Nora Roberts of fantasy, and I'm like, oh, if only I could be the Nora Roberts. That would be amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So, like, the reason why I was thinking about this is because, to me, the relationship that develops between Harry and Murphy in your books, it is to me one of the most realistic, in all seriousness, one of the most realistic relationships I've ever seen in fiction. And so, like, how did that come about, like the genesis of that incredibly long and arduous and heart-wrenching for readers relationship? Like, how did that all come about?
For Murphy, you know, I'm writing a character. You know, I'm writing this character. I'm writing Dresden, and the first thing I write about him is I want him to be. He's a wizard. He's a holdover from an older world. You know, I mean, I want him to be somebody who had a little bit more old-fashioned senses of chivalry and courtesy and so on. You know, when he bothers to show any. Well, I mean, you know, he's Dresden. He lips off to everyone. And I needed, you know, and as I was putting this character together, it's like, okay, I need a foil for this character. So Dresden's erratic, and you know, Dresden's sort of erratic and instinctual, and I wanted someone across from him who was going to be disciplined and orderly.
Okay.
You know, Dresden was, you know, basically everything that Harry is, Murphy's the opposite of, even physically.
Yeah. You
know, I mean, Harry's tall and skinny with the dark hair, the dark eyes, and Murphy's short and muscular with blonde hair and blue eyes. I mean, I just made them opposites. It's basic romance craft, you know, that I was following. And I mean, because I wasn't invested in this, I was doing it to prove a point. You know, I was trying to score points on my teacher, and just started writing it from there. And Murphy, you know, the first 2 books of the series, Murphy is not a supporting character. She's a minor villain in both of those books, because all she does is get in Harry's way, interfere with him, and make his life harder. Because her role in that, as my writing was not I was not writing a companion character. I was writing an adversary.
Right.
And there were adversaries who were not necessarily, you know, they were not necessarily at each other's throats all the time. But they came at things from very different angles. And from the writing craft perspective, she's a villain.
Right.
Or she was until book 3. Once it was the Walmart scene that changed everything for Murphy. Or no, that was book 4. And it was the Walmart scene that changed everything for Murphy.
Yeah.
Because then she kind of got right in the face all the things that Dresden is dealing with. You know, well, she got really screwed up in the third book, and then by the time she recovered from that, she was like, oh, there's this whole world of badness that I don't know anything about, and he does. I probably better start mining him for information and treating him like an ally instead of somebody who's occasionally a pain in my ass.
Right.
You know, so.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's where she came from, and then the romance sort of grew. I mean, originally I had Harry set up with Susan, and then I realized I'd created Lois Lane. So I was like, oh, well, I can't create Lois Lane because he'll just be rescuing her for 20 books, and that's no good. So I was like, okay, we got to do something else with her. All right, we can do the vampire thing. That's cool because then she'll be kind of half a superhero and can hang with him. And it's like, oh, but yeah, kind of the way I've written this, yeah, that's not going to work either. But poor Susan, I was the worst to her.
Yeah, a little bit.
I was the worst.
Not that I thought. So how often, like, when you're going through your writing process, how often does that happen when you reach a moment when you're like, oh crap, I shouldn't have done this, or oh crap, I can't do that now, and yet, like, because your Dresden Files seems to be very free of inconsistencies.
Yes, that I don't take credit for that.
Okay.
That's my beta readers helping me. I've got one beta reader who is just freakishly good at story consistency.
Okay.
Like to the point where she's got the entire thing on a database, and she can just go do a word search, you know, for things and be able to say, nope, in this book, in this chapter, on this page, this is what you said. And I'm like, oh, thank you. But it's very frustrating because of the way my process works. When I'm writing, I don't sit down and actually start writing a chapter until I can visualize the whole thing in my head. Once I can see the whole thing in my head and I sit down and write it, it comes out nice and easy. Editing is very light, because I kind of front load the process.
Right,
the downside of that is that when one of the beta readers comes up with something like, here, you missed this little detail, which kind of invalidates this entire thing, you know, this entire point, and then I'll have to be and then go start the process over again, and then, you know, 3 weeks later, it's like, okay, try this one. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, good.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Speaking of gambles and taking chances on stuff, when I read Aeronaut's Windlass, which is also phenomenal, if anybody's read Aeronaut's Windlass, what struck me immediately was that it's a very different writing style than the Dresden Files. And so when you wrote that and when it was released, were you worried that fans wouldn't follow you, that they wouldn't buy into such a different story?
I knew they wouldn't. Not all of them.
Okay, fair enough.
But I was trying to write something, and I finished the Codex Alera and the Spider-Man book from Marvel, and so I was trying to decide what am I going to do for my next side project. And so I wrote the first quarter or third of 4 different novels and showed it to my beta readers.
Okay.
And then I talked to them and like, okay, well, which ones, you know, which one do you think did you enjoy the most? Which one do you like the best? So, I mean, there was my Men in Black meets X-Men on the Moon science fiction.
Nice.
That was fun. It's 200 years in the future, and everybody who lives out in the orbital stations and on the moon got kind of sick of paying taxes to people back on Earth who have no idea the kind of problems they have and what they're dealing with. And eventually they took a power satellite and wrote, "Don't tread on me" in 30-meter letters across the Gobi Desert, and withdrew, you know, from Earth and formed the United System. That's what they call themselves, the United System. And I made up that entire story just so I could call the peace officers the U.S. Marshals. And so it's the U.S. Marshals is the name of the series.
I love it.
And they're the only ones who know about the aliens. So, you know, because the alien society in general, they've outlawed contact with less developed societies, and, you know, so when contact is outlawed, only the outlaws will make contact, and so the only aliens we see are like political refugees, religious nutsos, teenagers that are out eviscerating cows for fun. You know, I mean, that is the only aliens we get, and then it's the Marshal's job to deal with them quietly. You know, and so that was I wrote that, and I think I left it with my protagonist having ejected from his ship, whose core was about to explode, was damaged, about to explode, in a decaying orbit over the moon with a solar flare coming on. And he's been there for like 12 years. I don't know, a long time.
You just left him in limbo?
And well, I mean, I didn't decide to go with that book. I mean, I might go back to it later. And then the second book was sort of Gunsmoke meets The Black Company. And it was a fantasy book, and it was set after the epic fantasy war, when basically not only the good guys hadn't won, and the bad guys hadn't won, and the ward sort of collapsed under its own weight, and everybody was just trying to figure out how to rebuild, and it was set around a castle, and the idea was we're going to have these characters who are building this castle, and I'm going to kind of show what life in a medieval castle was like, and have awesome fantasy action adventure. You know, and that was my goal. So that one wasn't very well received because it was very black company, and that's not a series that is for everybody.
No.
And then I wrote the Aeronauts Windlass, and got an explosive response on the Aeronauts Windlass. Admittedly, probably because there's a talking cat. Yeah, that was cheap. I like to think that I'm a mercenary writer. I like to think that I'm very sensible and rational about the things that I pick, and that I don't pick things for like emotional reasons and so on. So when I was getting ready to write the Aeronauts Windlass, I knew I was going to have kind of a very Victorian feel, and so I wanted it to also kind of be more R-rated, R-rated because it's Victorians were a kinky lot. They really were, So I kind of wanted to build that into the series, and also I thought, and sex sells, so that's great. And then as I was getting down and kind of outlining and started writing, I said, but you know what sells more than sex? Animals. Especially talking animals. Yeah, that's got to be done. And so I swapped out sex for talking cats. Honestly, made my job a whole lot harder. Sex is easy to write. Oh my god, sex scenes are like action scenes. They're pretty simple. Oh, yeah. They're straightforward.
That sort of thing, like as a writer, like after you write a scene like that, does that sit with you for a while? Like,
oh yeah. The first time I wrote a scene that really disturbed me was in Full Moon, and I wrote this slaughter in the police station.
Oh yeah.
And I'd actually gone and visited the police station, the local police station, and kind of looked around and told them what I was doing. I'm researching. There's a werewolf loose, and they're like, okay, well here's the kind of response you could sort of expect from that sort of thing if there's a problem with the prisoner, and so I think a werewolf might be a little bit larger than our average prisoner problem, and I'm like, oh yeah. But having written that, and because I had to write this creature who was merciless and bloodthirsty, and a bunch of things that I wasn't, and yet and I had to show these people suffering and dying,
right,
and also kind of show the horror of it happening because Harry had picked like exactly the wrong potion to go into the police station under.
Of course.
Trying to look normal, like you're trying to look gray and boring, so that people wouldn't notice him. And he's sitting there trying to shout a warning that the werewolf's coming, and they can't hear him because of his own potion. It's like, that is just a nightmare scenario. But I got done writing that, and I just remember just kind of sitting there at the keyboard. Like this, and then it's like, I want some ice cream. And then I want to go curl up around my kid. Yeah. I probably shouldn't be near my kid for a little while. I want some ice cream. Like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you've got to throw yourself into the scenes of what you're doing. You got to invest it. You got to invest your own emotion into it. Because if you don't care, they won't care either.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
You said, so I was watching a bunch of your previous panels over the last couple of years to kind of research and not ask you a ton of questions you've been asked before. And so you were on a panel talking about villains, I think at Salt Lake Comic Con recently.
Okay.
And you were saying that your definition of a villain is that the villain has something missing that should be there.
Ooh, I would say
what you said.
It is what I said.
You can walk it back.
No, it's not that I want to walk it back, because I want to provide context.
Oh, what?
That was a description for villains, but it's a description of evil in the world in general.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think evil is a real thing. You don't really run into it a lot.
Yeah.
You run into stupid a whole lot more than run into evil in the real world.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Genuine evil, it's hard, but I mean, if you go talk to people who are responsible for dealing with that kind of thing, they'll look at you and tell you, yeah. I mean, there's lots of guys that I'll get, and they're just bad folks. And for whatever reason, they enjoy hurting other people or whatever, and that's just the normal riffraff run of the mill. But occasionally, you run into something that is deeply weird, and you look at it and you go, no, that is evil right there. I can see it. Okay. And for those folks, and just thinking about it, it's like that's what really drives the truly evil. When you talk about sociopaths and psychopaths, there's something that's missing there. I mean, and not everyone goes that way. Most sociopaths they get along just fine in society.
Okay.
But occasionally there's real evil there, and I think that's driven by something that is inside. That there's an empty space in there somewhere that they're trying to fill, and they don't know how to fill it.
Okay.
And that's what drives them to do the things they do.
Interesting. Is it almost like a soul? Like, I don't know if I wanted to use that term, but
I don't know if I would go with the soul,
Yeah.
but there's a need somewhere in there that they need to fill.
Okay.
And I don't know what that is, but and that's how that's how I build my villains. When
Okay.
I'm creating these people, it's like they have a need, that they have this hole that they have to fill that is bottomless, but they keep having to try to fill it.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that's the way it works when people actually go bad like that. Now for monsters, you could just have monsters be like, I just like the way you taste.
Right.
But when you're building the character, and when you build a character, you almost have to build a human or something that is human related, because that's all we have to talk to. But yeah, that's how I build my villains.
Okay.
I know there's something in them that and I try and figure out what it is, but I don't get it, because apparently I don't do it. I don't know.
Oh, okay, so
I'm making my best approximation. That's what I have to do. I have to make my best approximation for all kinds of things.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm such a liar. That's people ask me what I do for a living, and I say I tell long, complicated lies.
yeah, storytellers are liars.
Yeah,
We're
that's
charlatans, and
It is. Well, and really, everybody's got a gift, and my gift happens to be being able to sucker people into letting their emotions ride along on this line of thought.
Wow.
Now, you can have that gift and be a grifter, or you can have that gift to be like a writer or a stage musician or something, or a magician or something like that. You can turn whatever your gift is, no matter how dark you might think it is, you can probably turn it to something good. Okay. It's just a matter of focus and will and creativity.
Right. So we're benevolent charlatans, is what you're saying.
More or less. We're getting paid, so I don't know how benevolent we are, but at least we're trying not to hurt anybody while we're getting paid. No, really, all these words right here, $10 and they can be yours. That's my job.
I like that.
Man, that is a tough enterprise. That's a tough business to get off the ground, let me tell you.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, for me it was 10 years. It was 10 years before I made $1. And then it was another 10 years before I broke minimum wage.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And look at you now.
Yeah, weird. I don't know how that happened.
So I'm gonna, one thing I like to do in my interviews, which I maybe sort of stole from Larry King now, Larry, I hope you're not watching, is I throw very rapid fire questions at my guest. And first thing that pops in, so prep yourself. Okay. Once I've done that, we'll have some time for a little bit of audience Q&A. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, think of them now. You've got a couple of minutes. Okay. So are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay, I'm gonna move this sheet over here so you don't cheat.
Okay.
Are there enough hours in a day?
No.
Favorite Star Wars film?
Original. Star Wars.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, confused me there for a second. Am I prepared is the question. Best part of being a writer?
I can go to work in my pajamas.
Okay. Worst part of being a writer?
I'm like this crazy hermit shut-in most of the time.
Oh, okay.
So really that's what my job is being alone in a room and playing D&D with myself, basically, and writing it down.
Favorite D&D class?
Oh.
Don't think about it too long.
Yeah, you're right. Wizard.
Okay.
Wizard, followed by paladin, folled by fighter.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, is that the honest answer, or is that the I'm out of con answer?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just that I don't really like to play wizards anymore because it's too much like work.
Okay. I'll give you that.
I mean, when I play D&D, it's like I play the biggest, dumbest fighter you can possibly find. That thing with Dresden, it's me.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Who would win in a fight, Murphy or Captain Grimm?
Murphy.
Okay. Why?
Because Grimm would never hurt a woman like that.
Oh, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, Grimm's instincts would be all, nope. Don't hurt her, and then she'd clean him up because he didn't respect him.
Fair enough. A fandom that you would love to write for but haven't yet.
David Weber's Harrington series.
Nice. Something you've never written and don't think that you could pull off.
True crime.
Oh, okay.
Let's see, true crime. I don't think I could pull that off. And straight mystery. I don't know if I could do that.
Interesting. Okay.
No.
An author that you go to for advice.
Besides Nora Roberts.
Of course.
No, I don't go to writers for advice. I just watch them.
Oh, okay.
And then try and emulate them. You know, I mean, I'll go read their work.
Yeah.
I mean, like I wanted to improve my humor writing.
Okay.
So it's like, well, who's good at humor? Terry Pratchett's good at humor.
Fair enough. Okay.
Go read Pratchett till you figure out how he does it, and then you
These
keep
two are
reading.
happy. There we
Yeah.
go.
And when if you read Pratchett long enough and you analyze his craft, you can be like, oh, here's how he sets up jokes. Here's how he delivers those zingers. You know, like that. And it's like, okay, that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of reading, new or up and coming author that you're into, you think is awesome.
I like Brian McClellan and the Powder Mage series.
Oh my God, right?
They're very good. They're very. I mean,
if
if you enjoy Sanderson's Mistborn, you will love McClellan's Powder Mage.
Yeah.
It's very much the same thing where he sets up a magic system that is. It's very. It's almost ridiculously simple on its surface, and then it gets incredibly complex and wild as you go because people get creative with it.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's phenomenal. We could nerd in about that, but we won't.
Oh yeah.
Seriously, don't read it.
Also check out Benedict Jacket. Benedict Jacket writes a series, a wizard series called the Alex Virus novels. He's a wonderful guy. His series is really good. His wizard is one of the more creative and awesome ones I've seen.
Nice, awesome. That's high praise. Is the Brazilian witch doctor story true?
The Brazilian witch doctor story is true.
Okay, 100%.
Yes.
Okay, I believe you.
Yeah, all of it.
And then the last for this rapid fire, one piece of writing advice to leave our audience with.
Once you've finished one story, don't just keep on it. Go to the next story. It's going to teach you more.
I like that. Very good.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, I saw that hand over there first. So you should. I'm going to repeat it just for the camera and for everyone else in the audience, and then we'll turn it to Jim.
So in the Dresden Files, we see that a lot of the different wizards have their own styles of magic. How much is the way magic works individual to the wizard versus how much is it a function of magic itself?
Okay, so the question was, how much is an individual wizard's style tailored to them, and
magic.
And magic itself.
One of the models I used for understanding how magic works was martial arts, because they're both expressions of power that not all people have. Okay, and so I figured that's a reasonably good parallel to work with. I'll start drawing influence from that. So when you talk about martial artists, there's all these conversations. I remember having this conversation with some people. My very first real serious exposure to martial arts was the Karate Kid, of course. And then I went to a Ryukyu Kempo school and learned from a guy who was he was my teacher, and he was getting his English doctorate at UMKC, and he was living in a basement karate studio, and he had like a little closet where he kept his room. And he was about a 40-year-old Japanese guy named Shiro Shintaku. And Mr. Shintaku, he was my teacher. He was a really good guy. But what I didn't know is that he was from an old Japanese family. And when I say an old Japanese family, I mean he has a direct ancestor in the tale of Genji.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I saw pictures of him in the middle of a $5 million Shinto wedding on top of a New York skyscraper about 10 years ago.
Wow.
10 or 12 years ago. I mean, he's from that kind of family. He was living in complete poverty in this little place because his teacher, Master Oyata, who lived in Independence, he was like an old school true guy, martial artist.
Okay.
And he was, he had said, all right, well, you know what? If you want to come learn from me, you are welcome here, but your family's money isn't. If you want to come learn from me, you're going to live in my school. You're going to teach for your rent. You're going to teach for your rent, and I'll pay you enough for food. But that's all you can have here. There's not going to be any cars. There's not going to be any suits. You can get your stuff from a secondhand store.
Okay.
And you can live. You need to get away from that if you want to learn what I had to teach you.
Right.
And so he did.
Wow.
And this is Mr. Shintaku. I mean, I saw his 6-dan black belt test. They shot 3 arrows at him. At him, not past him, at him. Oh 2 of them had red feathers, 1 of them had blue. He had to deflect the red ones and catch the blue one. And he didn't know what color they were because Master Oyata held the feathers behind his hand like that, and he didn't know what color they were until he released them. And he was about 50 feet away. He had less than a quarter of a second to do it, and he did it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in real life. But back to the question. So martial arts, when you're having conversations about martial arts, people will say, well, what's the best martial art? Well, there's no best martial art because, you know, I mean, if you are a long, tall, skinny, quick guy, man, Taekwondo is for you. That is a great art for you. Maybe crane style kung fu, you'd be super well suited to that. Maybe not so much wrestling. You know, maybe not so much jujitsu. Maybe not so much, you know, some of the other arts that rely, maybe not so much boxing. It's going to depend on who you are and what you can do and the kind of resources you have that you were just given. Which martial art is the best martial art? For wizards, magic's the same way. You know, Harry is he's very good at very direct magic. And he's very good at magic that takes a lot of time and love and investment to build. You know, I mean, his gadgets that he makes for himself are second to none in the wizard world, even though he's a punk kid. He can blow things up as well as some of the heaviest hitting wizards around. But he sucks at a bunch of other things. And so as a wizard, you find out that there's some things you're going to be very good at, some things you aren't going to be good at. And if you want to be a serious wizard and be seriously skilled with your magic and with expressing that power, you've got to find one that matches what you can do. So that's why everybody's style is slightly different. And all wizards, I try and build them. Okay, well, here's somebody this guy's practical. This guy's romantic about the old days. This guy is completely focused on the self-discipline that comes with not needing any magical accoutrements, you know, to go along with what you do. And so that's why they're all different, though. Magic isn't just vanilla. I mean, it's based on who and what you are, and it's an expression of what you believe as well, which also affects it.
Best panel answer ever.
Me? Sorry, behind you. Sorry, I'll come to you.
You mentioned beta readers, and so what do you feel are some of the upsides and downsides of using beta readers?
So upsides and downsides of beta readers.
This is going to be different from author to author because writing is like magic. I feel there are no downsides, and the upsides are so massive that they cannot be ignored. The way I write is I write a chapter at a time, send it to the beta readers, and get their response. And the response is a 3-field questionnaire on a website that says, what did you like about this chapter? What didn't you like? Is there anything you didn't understand, or did you have any questions? And then being able to look at those answers and what people say back to me lets me diagnose what's wrong with the chapter. You know, they're my audience, or they're my lab rat, and well, you guys are kind of my lab rats too. But you know, when I get their answers from them, then I know if they're asking questions. Well, I haven't established this storyline clearly enough. If this seems out of character for a given character, you know, they say this is out of character for them. And I have to think, well, is that right, or is there something I need to do? I need to plant ahead of time to make sure that comes true later on. And it's also and I can't catch everything, especially not as the books get longer and longer. You know, I need more and more help to keep everything straight if I'm going to maintain the quality. So I mean, that's the last thing I want to happen. I don't want the Dresden Files to be something that I just go there. You know, like that. I don't want that. And it's the beta readers that help me not drive myself crazy.
How many do you have?
There are currently 14 on the list.
Oh wow.
And some of them have been there for a long time, and you know, since the first book, and some of them are new. I generally lose a couple people every year, and I got a big waiting list of people that when I lose somebody, I'll go to the waiting list. I need a beta reader. Okay. Are you up? Yeah. Okay. You can do this. Cool. But anyway, but yeah, beta readers are amazing because if you're doing it without them, then you're writing in a vacuum, and you're just sort of writing blind and throwing it out there, and then going, I hope someone likes it. And while there are some people who write like that, I just think it's smarter to go, instead of doing that, to go, hey guys, what do you think about this? Maybe I should fix that. Okay, what do you think about it now? How about now? You know, like that. And you get to a point where rewriting becomes counterproductive, but it's definitely worth it to be able to get some feedback, and that way you can adjust what you're doing as you go.
Very cool. Awesome. That's a question. And I'll get as many people as I can, I promise.
So you gave us a brief overview of how you came up with the ideas behind Dresden Files and Cinder Spires. Can you do the same for Codex Alera?
In 1998, 1999, Del Rey started the Del Rey Online Writing Workshop for aspiring writers. And basically what it was a website, and you could go, there was a forum, and you could go there and you could have discussions with other aspiring writers. And occasionally an editor or an agent or an author would come by and say hello and talk to us about writing until we scared them off. Because, I mean, how many people here are aspiring writers?
Oh,
Yeah, you know how you are when you start talking about your stuff. Yeah. And anyway, so we're on that, and there was always a lot of discussion going back and forth, and you know, I hadn't gotten published yet, nobody else had gotten published yet. And there came a discussion that was about writing craft, and it was, there were a couple of big competing ideas, and there were two major sides and a lot of fury. It was one of those discussions where you hit the reply button and then caps lock and then you start typing. Like that. One of those. Anyway, so on one side of the discussion, they were saying what was was this notion of the holy idea. They were calling it the holy idea with capital letters, and that the idea there is that if your idea is good enough, you can be a terrible writer and it'll still sell like gangbusters. And their example was, look at Jurassic Park. You know, genetically resurrecting dinosaurs, that couldn't have missed, like that. And the other side of the argument was the idea of writer craft and creativity. That was what really sold books. That you could have the oldest, tiredest, most worn out idea in the world, and if you are a good and creative enough writer, you can put a spin on it to make people enjoy it again. How many versions of Romeo and Juliet have we seen? And so I was leading this side, the writer side, and then there was somebody else. There was some loudmouth leading the idea side, and we went back and forth for a couple of weeks. And finally, this guy says to me, "All right, put your money where your mouth is. Let me give you some tired, worn out, terrible ideas, and let's see you make something that sells out of them." And I said, you know, being who I was at the time, "Nah, you know what? I tell you what. Why don't you give me 2 terrible ideas? I'll use them both." I might have been a little cocky at one time. And so the guy says, "All right, fine, we'll do it." And this is like in front of the audience. "All right, we'll do it. First terrible idea is Lost Roman Legion. I am so sick of Lost Roman Legion stories that all the Lost Roman Legion should have been found by now. So it's Lost Roman Legion, that's the first terrible idea." I say, "Okay, Lost Roman Legion. What's the second terrible idea?" And he says, "Pokemon." So I said, "Got it." Okay, now this tells you something about this guy, that this was the first year Pokemon to come out on television. And it tells you something about this guy, that he thought Pokemon was a terrible idea. All right, and so I took this and I went, okay, I've got Lost Roman Legion Pokemon, so I went and started investigating them. Lost Roman Legion, normally they're talking about the Ninth Hibernian Legion. It's a legion that marched north of the wall in England to deal with the Scots and never came home. Now, they apparently marched north into a thunderstorm and were never seen again, and that was how the Romans told the story. I suspect what happened is that the Scots did not welcome them warmly. The other option is that the Scots welcomed them very warmly. It's hard to tell with the Scots. We're very tricky. But anyway, but I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's say they marched off into a thunderstorm. They went somewhere else. Where did they go? Land of the Pokemon. All right, good. So I said, let's look at Pokemon. Let's break down that idea. And the idea of Pokemon is itself a two-idea fusion. First of all, it embraces the idea of kami in the Shinto religion. The Shinto believe that Shinto religion believes that every natural formation, every natural thing, rivers, mountains, trees, stones, they all have a spirit within them called the kami. That's part of the divine cosmos. And that you need to be aware of those spirits and show respect to them. You know, if there's a mountain, the mountain has a big damn spirit in it, and you better show respect. Pebble's got a spirit in it that's just as divine, but if you don't respect it, it's kind of a pebble and a tiny spirit. Well, what's it going to do? And then they took that idea, the idea of kami, and then they fused it with professional wrestling. And that was where Pokemon came from. So I said, all right, so let's have the Romans. But I got to have a name for them. I can't call them Pokemon. I got to come up with something. In the background, I have Big Trouble in Little China on because that's what I watch when I'm working on things many times. And I just got to the part where Egg Chen says, all movement in the universe is caused by tension between positive and negative furies. And I was like, ooh, furies. It's even Greco-Roman. You know, it's like, I will take that word. That is absolutely what the Romans would have named those things. And so I had the Romans march over there, and I looked at the composition of Roman legions. Roman legions, it's tough to imagine a tougher or more flexible colonizing unit than a Roman legion. They were built to go wherever they could walk. They could go there and build Rome. That's what the Roman legions did, because it was good to keep them busy building things instead of overthrowing emperors. then the legions were they were about half Roman citizens, about half German mercenaries, and then they would have about double that size in camp followers and wives, which the legionnaires were legally not allowed to have, which they had anyway because you can't tell humans that. And so I said, okay, so this group, they marches off. They march off, and they would be carrying all their own tools and equipment. They would be carrying smithing, the equivalent of a full smithy and other things with them. They could go somewhere and start building things, and so they did. They went to the land of the Pokemon, and they did what Romans did. They conquered and colonized, and they murdered a bunch of other sentient people that were there. Also, kind of what Romans did. I mean, but they were outnumbered with their back against the wall, and so they reverted to they kind of reverted to what they did. They fought. And so I gave them about 1,000 years to form a society, and they got through that rough first part where they basically turned themselves into like this Kali death cult for a long time. And then eventually the first emperor showed up and said, all right, that's enough of this nonsense. We're going to have a civilization, and busted enough heads to make it happen. And then I gave them another 1,000 years to put their civilization together, and then I started it on a farm with a farm boy who was a prince, because that's where fantasy stories start. I did not make that rule. But anyway, that's where it came from. And then I went back online to this guy, and I got a bit in, and I went back online to this guy, and I'm like, you know what? The internet was still pretty new. We weren't really sure how publishing on the internet was going to interact with copyright for first publishing rights and so on. So I didn't want to just share it to just anyone. I didn't want to put it on the internet because I thought it might be sellable. So I said, you know what? I've got this idea, but I don't want to publish it because I do think I'm going to be able to sell it, and I don't want to risk not being able to sell first rights. And so the guy looks at me and says, oh, so in other words, I was right. And I was like, okay, yeah, man, you were right. And he got to be right, and I got a 6-book contract. Look, so many of these stories have happened because I'm a hard-headed, arrogant pig at times that just can't back down from things, and that's how it goes.
That's awesome. So we are unfortunately over time, and I know there's another interview coming in, and I don't want to encroach on their space. So sorry if we didn't get to your questions, but I want to say thank you very much for this, Jim. This was a blast. And have a good rest of the con. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.